The storm hit harder than the forecast ever warned. I was stranded on a mountain road, my car buried under a wall of snow. No signal, no sound except the wind, howling like something alive. By the time I spotted the cabin through the white blur, my hands were numb and my breath came in broken gasps. I didn't expect anyone to be there, but when I pushed the door open, he was. A stranger, rugged, quiet, eyes the color of winter sky. He looked like someone who belonged to the cold. The firelight flickered across his face as he said in a voice both calm and commanding, "If you go back out there, you'll freeze without me." I should have been afraid. Instead, I stayed. And as the storm raged outside, something else began to burn inside that cabin. Something I couldn't name, something neither of us could escape. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the cold outside. It's the warmth you're not supposed to feel. If you've ever met someone who felt like both a refuge and a storm, stay until the end. This story will stay under your skin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories that will leave you breathless. The snow swallowed everything. The road, the trees, the sky, even sound itself. I'd been driving for almost 5 hours when the storm turned from beautiful to dangerous. My phone lost signal miles ago, the gas tank was nearly empty, and I hadn't seen another car in hours. The radio had gone silent, just static, like the world outside. The GPS said there was a ranger station up ahead, but the road disappeared beneath a blanket of white. My tires spun. The car groaned, then gave up completely. That's when I realized I was alone, truly alone. I sat there for a minute, breath fogging the windshield, trying to calm my heartbeat. But the wind outside was screaming now, and the temperature was dropping fast. If I stayed, I'd freeze. If I left, maybe I'd freeze slower. I grabbed my flashlight, zipped my coat, and stepped into the storm. The world outside was a blur of white and gray. I couldn't tell where the road ended or the sky began. My boots sank deep into the snow with every step. My jeans soaked through in minutes. Then, through the blizzard, I saw it, a faint light, warm, flickering, alive. I stumbled toward it, slipping, falling, getting back up again until the shape of a cabin appeared through the haze. Smoke rose from a crooked chimney, the glow of fire dancing behind the windows. I banged on the door once, twice, yelling, "Hello! Anyone there?" No answer. I hesitated, my fingers already numb, then pushed the door open. The warmth hit me like a wave. Inside, a fire roared in the stone fireplace. The air smelled of smoke, pine, and something faintly metallic, like old tools and damp wood. Then a voice behind me said, low and steady, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. He was standing in the doorway of a back room, a shadow against the firelight. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows, forearms dusted with sawdust. He looked like someone carved out of the same wood the cabin was built from. I'm sorry," I stammered. "My car's stuck down the road. I just needed somewhere to—" He walked closer, his boots thudding softly on the wooden floor. His eyes were sharp and pale, assessing. "You picked a bad night to get lost," he said. "I didn't exactly plan it." He stared at me for a moment, then sighed and nodded toward the fire. "Sit down before you pass out." I obeyed, sinking into the worn leather chair near the hearth. My body trembled uncontrollably as the heat started to sting my frozen skin. He walked past me, grabbed a metal kettle from the stove, and poured steaming water into a chipped mug. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "It's just tea." "Thank you." I tried to wrap my hands around the mug, but they were shaking too hard. He watched me quietly for a moment, then said, "You'll freeze without me." The words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. He pulled a heavy wool blanket from a trunk and tossed it over my shoulders. The gesture was rough, almost impatient, but there was something careful in the way his fingers brushed the back of my neck. "You live here alone?" I asked, trying to make my voice steady. He nodded. "Most of the time. Why?" "Less noise," I almost laughed. "Seems like too much quiet to me." "Depends what you're running from." The way he said it made me look up. His eyes met mine. Calm, unreadable, but there was something behind them. Something he didn't want me to see. Maybe I'm not running, I said. He smirked faintly. Everyone's running from something. Hours passed. The storm outside grew worse, wind battering the windows like angry hands. We sat by the fire, trading silence more than words. He told me his name was Liam. He didn't ask for mine right away, like names didn't matter here, not yet. Eventually he asked, "How far were you headed?" "Upstate," I said. "To a friend's cabin. I was supposed to help with renovations for the weekend." He arched an eyebrow. "Guess you found the wrong one." "Maybe the right one," I murmured before I could stop myself. He didn't answer. But I caught the faintest flicker of something in his expression, a twitch of his jaw, a shift in his eyes. Later, as I sat wrapped in the blanket, I noticed his hands. Strong, calloused, a small scar across one knuckle. He caught me looking. "What?" he said. "Nothing." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like he could see the thoughts I was trying to hide. "You ask too many questions." "I haven't asked that many. You're thinking them loud enough." I smiled nervously. "Maybe I just like knowing who saved me." He looked away. "I didn't save you," I frowned. "You kind of did." His voice dropped, quiet but firm. "No one saves anyone. You got lucky, that's all." There was something bitter in the way he said it. I wanted to ask more, but something about his tone told me not to. When the fire finally dimmed, he stood. "There's a spare room in the back. You can stay till morning." I hesitated. "You sure?" He met my eyes again, something unreadable flickering there. "Storm's not stopping anytime soon. Unless you plan on freezing, you're staying." He walked past me toward the hall, pausing at the doorway. "Get some rest," he said, "and don't wander. This place gets dark fast." Then he disappeared into the shadows. I lay awake for hours, listening to the wind pound against the cabin walls, wondering who Liam really was and what he was doing up here all alone, and why, even after everything. His voice still echoed in my head. "You'll freeze without me." He said it like a warning, but it felt like a promise. When I woke, the light spilling through the cabin's small window was pale and cold, the kind of morning light that belonged to untouched snow. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I heard the sound of someone moving in the next room. Slow, methodical, the soft scrape of metal against wood. Liam. I sat up, blanket still wrapped around me. My clothes from the night before hung over a chair near the fireplace, dry now. He'd taken the time to hang them. I wasn't sure whether to thank him or be embarrassed. When I walked into the main room, he was by the table, sharpening a small hunting knife. A half-eaten breakfast sat beside him. "Eggs, bread, coffee, you sleep?" he asked, not looking up. Eventually, he nodded once. "Good. You'll need energy if you plan on digging that car out." I hesitated. "You think the storm's over?" He finally met my eyes. "No, but the worst has passed. For now." I sat down across from him, the smell of the coffee pulling me back to life. "You made all this?" He shrugged. "Couldn't let you starve." "I'm not a monster. Didn't think you were." He smirked slightly. "You hesitated before saying that." "Maybe I don't know you well enough yet." He raised an eyebrow. "And you think breakfast will fix that?" Stranger things have happened. For the first time, I saw something close to amusement on his face, quick, almost invisible but real. As we ate, I noticed small details about the cabin I hadn't seen last night. Maps pinned to the wall, a rifle hanging above the door, a stack of letters tied with string on the shelf. Everything had a purpose. Everything looked temporary, like he could leave at any moment. "You live here all year?" I asked, mostly. "Don't you get lonely?" He paused for a second too long before saying, "No." Liar. That got a real reaction. His knife stopped mid-motion. He glanced up, something sharp flickering in his eyes. "You've got a mouth on you for someone who needed rescuing." I didn't mean. He set the knife down. "Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to." The air between us went still. Then, after a moment, he sighed and poured another cup of coffee, sliding it toward me. "Drink before it gets cold." Outside, the storm had softened to a steady snowfall. The trees were draped in white, the world muted and peaceful, but the quiet felt deceptive, fragile. I helped him stack firewood by the door. He worked without speaking, his movements efficient and strong. Every now and then, he'd glance toward me, like he wanted to say something but decided against it. Finally, I said, "You don't talk much, do you?" He didn't stop working. "Talking's overrated. You say that because you're good at silence." He looked up, eyes meeting mine. "And you're not?" "I hate it. Feels like waiting for something bad to happen." He smirked faintly. "That's because you don't know how to listen to it." I tilted my head. "Listen to silence?" He tossed another log on the pile. "It tells you what you don't want to admit." I didn't know what to say to that. Later, when the light began to fade again, I found myself by the window, staring out at the endless snow. Liam was sitting by the fire, whittling a small piece of wood into something unrecognizable. The firelight made his skin glow warm against the cold world outside. "You ever plan on leaving this place?" I asked quietly. "Why would I?" "Because most people do. They go back to jobs, friends, families." He didn't look up. "You think I have any of those?" "I think everyone has someone." That made him stop carving. He set the knife down, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "Not me," his tone was final, but I couldn't help pushing. "Then what are you hiding from, Liam?" He looked at me, really looked. "You ask questions like you think you deserve the truth." "Maybe I do." He stood, walking past me toward the window. "You don't, not yet." The storm returned by nightfall, worse than before. Wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, rattling the windows. I tried to sleep, but the noise kept me awake. Around midnight I heard movement. Liam's footsteps, the creak of the door. I got up and followed him into the main room. He was at the fireplace, throwing another log onto the flames. "You can't sleep either?" I asked. He turned, surprised but not angry. "No, storms do that." I stepped closer, drawn by the light and his voice. "You mean the noise?" He shook his head. "The memories." Something in his tone made my chest tighten. "Who were you before this?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. He just stared into the fire, eyes distant. Finally he said, "Someone who made too many mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind you don't walk away from." The flames reflected in his eyes, and for a moment I saw something raw, regret, pain, maybe even fear. The wind slammed against the window, making both of us flinch. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Go back to bed, Evan." That was the first time he said my name. It hit me harder than I expected. I hesitated. "And what about you?" He looked at me, tired, guarded, but softer now. "I'll stay up. Someone has to keep the fire alive." I took a step closer, the fire's warmth reaching between us. "You don't have to do it alone," he gave a half smile. "You'll freeze without me." The words again, half warning, half invitation, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't move away this time. By morning, the wind had turned feral. It roared through the forest like a living thing, bending trees and shaking the cabin so violently that snow drifted through the cracks in the windowsills. I woke to the sound of wood splitting, the unmistakable crack of something breaking outside. Liam was already up, pulling on his coat. "What was that?" I asked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. He didn't answer right away. He strapped a flashlight to his wrist, jaw tight. "Part of the shed roof went down. If we lose the firewood under it, we're in trouble." I glanced toward the frost-covered window. "You can't go out there." He turned, his expression steady but distant. "You want to stay warm tonight? Then we don't have a choice." I started to argue, but something in his tone, the finality of it, shut me up. The door flew open, the wind slamming into us like a wall. Liam pushed through first, shoulders hunched against the snow. I followed him, half blinded, my breath turning to ice in the air. The shed sat 30 feet from the cabin, barely visible through the blizzard. Half its roof had caved in. Inside, the firewood pile was buried under heavy planks and ice. Liam grabbed a shovel and started digging. "Stay behind me!" he shouted over the wind. I didn't listen. I took another shovel and joined him. For a while we worked in silence, two shapes against the white chaos. The snow burned my skin. The air stabbed my lungs. Every time I thought we should stop, Liam pushed harder, faster. He was fighting more than the storm. I could see it in the way he moved, like something inside him was trying to claw its way out. Then a loud crack split the air. The rest of the roof collapsed. "Liam!" I yelled, diving forward. He tried to move, but a beam came down, catching his leg beneath it. The world went quiet for half a second, the kind of quiet that only happens right before panic. I scrambled to his side, shoving snow off his coat. "Don't move!" He gritted his teeth. "I'm fine. You're not fine." I grabbed the end of the broken beam and pushed with everything I had. It didn't budge. My hands went numb, my vision blurred, but I didn't stop. "Evan!" he said sharply. "Stop before you—" "Shut up!" I yelled, forcing one last push. The beam shifted just enough for him to pull free. He fell back into the snow, gasping. I dropped beside him, both of us shaking. "Can you walk?" I asked. He nodded, breath ragged. "Yeah, just twisted." I slung his arm over my shoulder, and together we limped back toward the cabin, each step a battle. Inside, the fire was nearly out. The cold crept into everything. Liam collapsed onto the rug near the hearth, his leg trembling. I threw the remaining logs onto the flames and turned back to him. His face was pale, his lips blue. "Your hands," he said, pointing. "They're bleeding." I hadn't noticed. The skin across my palms was raw and cracked from the ice. "Doesn't matter," I said. "We need to check your leg." He shook his head. "I told you, it's fine." "Liam." My voice came out quieter, steadier. "Let me help." Something in the way I said it made him stop fighting. He leaned back against the chair, exhaling. I rolled up his torn pant leg carefully. His shin was bruised, swollen, not broken but close. He hissed when my fingers brushed the skin. "Sorry," I murmured. He met my eyes, the corner of his mouth twitching. "You're a terrible nurse. You're a terrible patient." That earned a small laugh, then softer. "Thank you for not leaving me there." I shook my head. "You'd have done the same." He looked at me for a long time. "You don't know that." We sat there for hours, wrapped in silence and flickering light. The storm pounded outside, but the fire between us was steady now. Finally I asked, "Why do you live here, Liam? Really?" He stared into the flames. "Because nowhere else will have me." "Why not?" He hesitated, jaw tightening. Then he said, "I used to be a firefighter. There was an accident 2 winters ago, a house out by the ridge. I pulled 2 people out. I thought there was no one else inside." He paused. I waited. "There was," he said. "A boy, 17. He didn't make it." My chest tightened. "It wasn't your fault. Tell that to his father," he whispered, "or to the department that made me the scapegoat." The crackle of the fire filled the space between us. "That's why you stay here," I said softly. "Because you think you deserve to." He didn't answer. He just stared at the fire like it was punishing him. After a while I moved closer, sitting beside him on the floor. He didn't pull away. "You don't have to be alone forever," I said. He let out a low breath, almost a laugh. "You keep saying that like you know me." "Maybe I'm starting to." His gaze lifted, meeting mine. The air between us was warm now, the firelight flickering across his face. "Careful, Evan," he said quietly. "I'm not who you think I am." I smiled faintly. "Neither am I." We sat like that for a long time, 2 people with too many ghosts, finding warmth in a world that had tried to freeze us both. Then, without speaking, he reached out, his hand brushing the back of mine. It wasn't a move or a question, it was just contact, simple and real. The storm howled outside, but inside the cabin, there was only the soft sound of breathing and the fire's slow, steady crackle. And for the first time in years, Liam didn't look like someone running from something. He looked like someone who'd finally stopped. By the 3rd night, the cabin felt smaller. The storm hadn't stopped, it just changed its rhythm, falling heavier in waves that sounded like whispers against the walls. Outside, the world was buried in white. Inside, it was only us and the fire. Liam's leg was better, but he still limped slightly when he moved. Every time he winced, I wanted to help, and every time I offered, he refused. "I've been through worse," he'd say, which sounded less like pride and more like punishment. That evening, the sky turned dark early. The radio on the shelf crackled to life for the first time since I'd arrived, a weather alert announcing road closures and warnings to stay indoors. "No rescue teams until at least 3 more days," the voice said before fading back into static. 3 more days, I murmured. Liam threw another log on the fire. "Guess you're stuck with me." His tone was dry, but there was something behind it, something that almost sounded like hope. Later, while he fixed a loose board by the door, I sat at the table, tracing patterns in the condensation on my mug. "You ever get used to it?" I asked. He didn't turn. "To what?" "The quiet," he paused, hammer in hand. "You don't get used to it. You just learn to live inside it. And you like that?" He finally turned around, eyes meeting mine through the firelight. "I like control. Quiet gives you that," I shook my head. "No, it doesn't. It just hides the noise." He gave me a long look, then set the hammer down. "You talk like someone who's been running from something too." I smiled weakly. "Maybe I am." He studied me, then said softly, "You don't have to tell me what it is." "Would you?" I asked. He looked back at the fire. "No, we didn't talk for a while after that." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Shadows moved along the walls, stretching and collapsing. I couldn't stop glancing at him, the slope of his shoulders, the calm in his face that didn't match the tension in his hands. Finally, he spoke again. "You ever notice how storms make people tell the truth?" I smiled faintly. "That what this is? Truth serum disguised as weather?" He sat down across from me, the table between us now feeling too small. "Something like that. And what truth are you avoiding, Liam?" He didn't answer right away. Then in a low voice he said that I stopped believing I deserved warmth a long time ago. The words hit me harder than I expected. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You think that's something you decide?" "Doesn't matter," he said quietly. "Once you believe it long enough, it becomes true." "You're wrong." He tilted his head. "You sound sure, because I've been there." His eyes softened, but he didn't speak again. Later, after dinner, the power went out. The radio died. The only light left came from the fire. He went to check the generator outside, but I grabbed his coat before he could open the door. "Don't! It's suicide out there." He looked down at my hand, gripping his sleeve, then back at me. "You really think I can't handle a little cold?" "It's not the cold I'm worried about," I said. He froze just for a second. Then he gave a faint smile and dropped the coat. "Fine, you win." We sat by the fire again. The air felt charged, too quiet, too still. He poured us both some whiskey from a small bottle on the shelf. "Only thing that keeps the cold away," he said. I took a sip. It burned down my throat, but it wasn't unpleasant. After a while, he said, "Why'd you really come up here?" "Don't tell me it was just renovations." I hesitated. "Because I needed to leave. I felt trapped where I was. Everyone expected me to be someone I wasn't." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And who are you, really?" I let out a shaky breath. "Still figuring that out," he smiled faintly. "Yeah, me too." A branch cracked outside, startling us both. He reached for the rifle instinctively, then relaxed. "Wind," he said, but his hands trembled slightly when he set it down. "Liam," I said softly, "whatever happened before, it doesn't have to define you." He stared into the fire. "You think it's that easy?" "No, but you don't have to stay buried with it either." He looked up, eyes glinting in the firelight. "You talk like you know what it's like to carry something heavy." "I do. What is it?" "My father," I said quietly. "He never forgave me for who I am. Said I embarrassed the family. I left home 2 years ago. Haven't spoken to him since." He was silent for a long time. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Guess we both learned how to disappear." I nodded. "But disappearing isn't the same as healing." He chuckled dryly. "You always talk like that?" "Only when someone's listening." He met my gaze, his expression softening. "Then keep talking." The room went quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't cold. It was full, heavy with things neither of us could name. When the wind rattled the door again, I flinched. He noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, even though my pulse was racing. Without thinking, I pulled the blanket tighter around myself. He stood, crossed the room, and sat down beside me on the rug. "You're shaking," he said. "It's cold." He gave a faint smile. Eyes on the fire. "You'll freeze without me." The same words again, but now they sounded different. Not a warning, a confession. He reached out slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His fingers brushed mine, then stayed. We sat there side by side, the storm outside fading into background noise. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look like a man hiding from the world. He looked like someone trying to find a reason to come back to it, and somehow I knew that reason was sitting right next to him. The storm finally began to die sometime around dawn. The wind still moaned through the trees, but the rage had left it. Snow drifted down in lazy spirals, soft and harmless now. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to glowing embers. I woke curled under a blanket on the rug. Liam sat in the same chair he had occupied most of the night, watching the last flames fade, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt fragile, like the world had paused to listen. "You stayed up all night again," I said softly. He nodded. "Old habit, from when you were a firefighter." He glanced at me, expression unreadable. From before that. There was always a before that with him, a wall I could see but never climb. I sat up and stretched, the blanket falling from my shoulders. "So what happens now?" He looked toward the window, where sunlight was breaking through the thinning clouds. "Now we dig out your car. The plows will probably reach the highway by tonight." My stomach tightened. "So that's it?" He turned to me slowly. "That's what you wanted, right? To leave?" I didn't answer. He stood limping slightly and started gathering tools. "You got people waiting for you." "A life to get back to." "Yeah," I said quietly. "And what about you?" He shrugged. "I'm already where I belong. Here, in this cabin." He didn't respond, just reached for his coat. "Liam, you can't stay locked away forever." "I'm not locked away," he said, his tone sharp now. "I'm safe." "Safe isn't living." He froze for a moment, then sighed. "You should eat something before we go." And just like that, the wall was back. We worked in silence for hours, digging a path through the snow that reached the edge of the buried road. The sun was brighter now, reflecting off the white surface so fiercely it hurt to look. When we finally stopped to rest, he leaned against the shovel, breathing hard. "You've got more stamina than I expected." "I had a good teacher," I said. He gave a tired smile. "Don't flatter me. You did most of the work." I brushed snow off my gloves. "You don't take compliments well, do you?" He smirked faintly. "Not used to them. Maybe you should get used to it." He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to stay around long enough to keep giving them?" The question hit deeper than it should have. I forced a small laugh. "Maybe." But neither of us laughed after that. By late afternoon, the path was clear enough for the car to move, if it still started. We stood at the edge of the drive, staring at it like it was both a miracle and a curse. "Well," I said, "guess this is it." Liam nodded. "Guess so." He wiped his hands on his coat, then looked up at me. "You'll want to leave before dark. Temperature drops fast after sunset." "Right," I said, but I didn't move. The silence stretched between us again. Not cold this time, just heavy, full of all the things neither of us wanted to say. Finally I whispered, "I don't really want to go." He turned to me, surprise flickering across his face. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because if you do, I might believe you." The air between us changed. The kind of stillness that comes before something inevitable. He took a slow breath. "You don't know what you're doing." "Maybe not," I said, stepping closer. "But I know what I feel. Evan, you keep pretending you don't care, but you do. You wouldn't have let me stay, wouldn't have fixed my clothes, wouldn't have stayed up every night watching the fire like you were keeping me alive along with it." He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "You don't understand? Then explain it to me," I said, voice cracking. "Because all I've seen is a man who's trying to convince himself he deserves to be alone, when he doesn't." His eyes opened then, full of something raw and unguarded. "You think I don't want you here?" I think you're scared to admit you do. For a second, the only sound was the wind brushing against the trees. Then very quietly he said, "You're right." The confession hung there like the last breath before fire. He took a step forward, close enough that I could feel his warmth, even through the cold air. "I've spent 2 years trying to disappear," he said. "Trying to become someone no one could find, no one could hurt. And then you showed up out of nowhere, looking at me like I was still worth something." "You are," I whispered. He laughed softly, a sound that broke halfway through. "You don't even know me. I don't need to." The words came out before I could stop them. He stared at me for a long time, and I could almost see the war behind his eyes, wanting to move closer, wanting to run. Finally he said, "You'll regret it." "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." He hesitated, then stepped forward until we were inches apart. I could smell the smoke on his jacket, the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. His hand lifted like he was about to reach for me, then stopped in mid-air. I closed the distance myself. It wasn't dramatic, just quiet, the way storms end. His lips were warm, hesitant, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he touched me too hard. When we finally broke apart, he kept his forehead against mine, eyes closed. "This doesn't fix anything," he whispered. "I know," I said. "But maybe it's a start." The rest of the evening passed in fragments, making dinner together, sharing silence that didn't need to be filled, the firelight painting everything in gold and shadow. He sat across from me, staring at the flames. "You'll be able to leave tomorrow. The road will be clear. Will you still be here?" He looked up slowly. "Where else would I go?" I smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll come back," he shook his head. "You don't belong here." "Maybe I don't belong anywhere else." He didn't answer. He just watched me, something unreadable in his eyes, like he was memorizing me in case he never saw me again. And for the first time, I realized that when he said, "You'll freeze without me," he hadn't been talking about the weather. He'd been talking about everything that scared him to feel. By morning, the storm was over. The silence it left behind was strange, too clean, too final. I stood at the window, looking out at a world that had been remade overnight. The snow glittered like glass under the pale winter sun. The road was visible again, a dark ribbon cutting through the white. Behind me, I heard Liam moving quietly through the cabin. The familiar sounds, boots on the wood floor, a kettle heating on the stove, felt different now, like the fragile rhythm of something that was ending. He didn't say good morning. Neither did I. We just moved around each other, careful not to touch, careful not to look too long. Last night's warmth still hung in the air, but it had changed shape. It wasn't passion now, it was something heavier, the weight of what came after. Finally, he said, "The road's clear." I nodded. "Yeah, you should go before it ices again." The way he said it, steady, quiet, hurt more than I expected. We sat across from each other at the table, the last of the fire crackling between us. He poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs, the same ones we'd been using since that first night. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Then don't. Evan." His voice stopped me. He wasn't angry, but something in his tone was final. "What happened last night? It can't follow you out of here." I swallowed hard. "Because you don't want it to? Because it won't survive out there." I looked at him for a long time. His face was calm, unreadable, but his hands were trembling slightly where they rested on the table. "You don't believe that," I said quietly. He looked away. "You don't know what I believe anymore." "Then tell me." He took a slow breath, eyes on the fire. "I've lost people because they trusted me, because they thought I could protect them. I can't do that again." "You did protect me," I said. "You saved my life." He shook his head. "No, I delayed the cold. That's all." I stood up, pacing near the window. "So what, you just go back to hiding here? Pretend none of this ever happened?" He didn't look at me. "That's what I'm good at. Liam, you can't live your whole life waiting for storms to end. Eventually you have to step outside." He gave a dry laugh. "Says the guy who can't wait to drive away. That's not fair." He looked up at me finally, eyes tired but fierce. "Isn't it?" For a moment I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I'd stay, that none of this was temporary, but the truth caught in my throat. He stood and crossed the room, picking up my coat from the hook by the door. "You should go before the next front moves in." "I'm not ready." "You never are." He handed me the coat, his fingers brushing mine briefly, just enough for me to feel that he didn't want to let go either. We walked outside together. The air was sharp and bright, snow crunching under our boots. My car sat half buried in the snowbank, but the engine started on the first try, a small mercy from the universe. Liam stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the horizon instead of me. "Will you be okay here?" I asked. He gave a faint, crooked smile. "I've been okay before you came." "That's not what I asked." He hesitated. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll manage." The words sounded hollow. I wanted to say something, anything, to make him stop pretending. But every sentence I tried to build fell apart before it reached my mouth. So instead, I said quietly, "You'll freeze without me." He turned then, startled. I almost smiled through the ache in my chest. "That's my line," he said softly. "I know," I said. "Guess I'm stealing it." He took a step closer, the snow crunching under his boots. His eyes searched mine, looking for permission or maybe forgiveness. "You should go," he whispered. "Say you'll miss me," he exhaled. "I already do." I don't remember the drive back down the mountain clearly. The trees blurred together, and every turn felt like leaving something behind that I wasn't ready to lose. When I reached the main road, I stopped the car, got out, and looked back. The cabin was invisible from here, just miles of white and silence. I wanted to turn around, but I didn't. Some things you have to carry with you, even if it hurts. It's been 3 months since the storm. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the crackle of that fire, the low rumble of his voice. I've gone back to my city life, the noise, the lights, the endless pretending that everything makes sense. But some nights, when the wind howls through the cracks of my apartment windows, I feel that same cold creeping in again. And I remember his words. "You'll freeze without me." Maybe he was right. Maybe he wasn't warning me. Maybe he was warning himself. Because I think we both knew even then that what we had wasn't meant to survive the world outside that cabin. But that doesn't make it any less real. I sent a letter last week to the old ranger station near the mountain. I didn't know what address to use, so I just wrote his name, Liam Walker. I don't know if he'll ever see it. All I wrote inside was this: "The storm's gone, but the warmth stayed. Hope you're still keeping the fire alive." I didn't sign it. He'll know who it's from. And sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, I swear I hear his voice again, quiet but steady, like a memory that refuses to fade. "You'll freeze without me." And I whisper back into the dark, "Then I guess I'll keep the fire burning." Love doesn't always last forever. Sometimes it exists just long enough to thaw something frozen inside us, to remind us that we can still feel, still hope, still want to be seen. Would you have stayed in that cabin or driven away? Would you have risked the silence for one more night by the fire? If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the next story that will warm your heart, even in the coldest places.